This is the case you'll see in a lot of cases. There's no pods on these plants. They're just green.
Hi, I'm Ashley Bunhorst, Seed and Seed Treatment Manager here with Liqui-Grow.
And I'm Phil Long, Regional Agronomist here with Liqui-Grow.
And Phil, we're out here in a bean field in Traer today talking about what a great season it was for our soybean crop. Give us a little insight on how the season was as far as weather and how our beans are looking this year.
Sure, Ashley. You know, it seems like a lot of times growers think, we had a good corn year, it's got to be a good bean year. And unfortunately, that's not necessarily the case. As most people know, beans rely a lot on that August, or I'm going to call it, be more descriptive, seed fill time frame to have moisture. And we didn't have that this year, but what did we have before that? So in a lot of cases we had plenty of moisture, maybe too much up front, but really good vegetative growth, and missed a lot of diseases. I will say there were some out there, they just didn't get too bad. I think we're going to have some outstanding soybean yields. However, we still turned off dry in August during seed fill. Now, I don't want to make this sound too bad, because in Iowa we have, in cases, 4 to 6% organic matter that holds a lot of water. So we have ample moisture sitting there, but we did turn off dry. So there might have been some potential there that maybe didn't get fully utilized with that shut off of the moisture, the faucet, I guess, towards the end of the season at the end of the seed fill.
So with that being said, in August, what you're telling us is that there might have been more potential there for some of our soybeans. And what we're seeing here is, in some parts of the state, we're seeing green stems, but there's pods produced on it. And then we're also seeing the other scenario where we have green stems, no pods, and a lot of leaves and some insect damage.
Yeah.
So we're seeing two vastly different scenarios this year in our harvest time frame. Give us a little insight on why this is.
Yeah, two opposite ends of the spectrum here. This one stands out like a sore thumb when you're combining, but it doesn't affect harvest near as much as that one does, if that one's throughout the field. But let's talk about this one first. So it's got all its leaves on there. And if you look closely, a lot of times, if you slow down, or you can see it from the cab or get out of the cab, you'll notice there's very few pods on this. So just maybe a handful, I don't know, 3, 4, or 5, and then a bunch of these pod clusters that basically aborted. So why did that happen? In a lot of cases, and you can even see in the leaves that are still on this plant, they are crinkled. There's likely a virus in this particular plant. And I'd say in a lot of cases where we have random plants like this, just sporadic, random, a few per acre, it's a case of a vectored plant disease or a virus by either a bean leaf beetle or aphid or thrip or something that moves something like soybean mosaic virus or bean pod mottle virus, any of the above we have every year, just not, in huge quantities. So any of those viral diseases can cause an issue like this.
Okay.
So the plant shuts down, and unfortunately pods cease, and they're done. So there's no potential there. The plant can't put any of these nutrients that it has stored up in all these leaves into the pod. So there's nowhere for it to go. It knows it's at the end of the season, but it has nowhere to go with all these sugars and carbohydrates and photosynthates. So it stays green for the foreseeable future, and will likely stay green until frost.
Sure. So an insect came along, damaged the leaf, allowed in a virus, and then our plant wasn't able to reproduce. The plant wants to, but the virus cut it off, and It was over from there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it just shut down the plant. It ceased, likely earlier on than we can see right now. These pods were not developing, so clearly it had nowhere to go with it. And this is the case you'll see in a lot of cases. There's no pods on these plants. They're just green, and they're going to be green until after that frost. So not one to worry that much about.
Okay, there's that situation. On the other hand, we have pods. We're not as green, but we're still green. No leaves.
Yeah, so this would be the other side of the spectrum, something we see more commonly, and unfortunately it's going to cause more issues with harvestability, because these green stems are much tougher to harvest. This is the case where you're like, oh, the beans are getting tough. No, the stems are green. Thankfully we have rotor combines that do a much better job at this than the old conventional ones do. They'd really be growling. But if you have green stems in the field like this, with good pod fill, and you could still have 60, 70, 80 bushel beans and have green stems. So this is a combination of genetics, by environment, by management. There can be a lot of causes for this. But essentially, what it boils down to is this plant's senesced, the leaves have fallen off, but there's extra photosynthate still in the plant, and they're stuck in the stem. They were being remobilized from the leaves, and they're stuck in the stem. You can see purple. A lot of cases, it's usually towards the sun. That's kind of a protector. That anthocyanin is a kind of a protector for the cells, so it moves towards facing the sun. But that purple is the same thing. Same thing in corn. It's a lot of sugar left in that stem with nowhere to go. So there's extra sugar in this plant with nowhere to go. So why did that happen? Well, somewhere or another, this plant aborted some flowers and pods. You know, we know soybeans abort over 2/3 of their flowers and pods, but in this case, this soybean did it early on. And then, unfortunately, it had plenty of potential. So we had good moisture through July and even into August, had plenty of potential, but it didn't have the pod numbers there, the seeds to fill. So leaves started remobilizing, putting into the seeds. There just wasn't enough places for it to go. It got stuck in the stems as those leaves senesced and fell off the plant. And unfortunately, it's stuck in the stem. And it's not going to move. Unfortunately, that's what it's going to look like, likely till frost as well.
So weather, environment was really on our favor this season. So we really had a lot to pack in there, but the bean was maxed out. The bean pods are maxed out. We had nowhere else for all those nutrients to go. The leaves fell off.
Yeah, and this could be throughout a whole field. You know, we were talking earlier, this is a wet situation. This is in a wet pocket. Could be in a dry pocket. It could be any of the above scenarios that cause it to maybe drop or abort some flowers or pods there when it's doing that, late July through August time frame, and then not have enough to fill out. You know, when it has the potential in the leaves, it just doesn't have enough beans to be able to, because it will stop putting pods on at about R5.5, and then it can't put any more on. So even if it would have good conditions, it can't put any more on. So once it's determined the number of pods, and it's only set this many, you can see there's only 2 or 3 per node. It had more to give in this case. Yeah, compared to this, which has 4 or 5, and this one's obviously dead and senesced and all the way brown. It had more to give, even if it's a really good yielding bean. You know, it had a lot to give because of the season we had. So it's frustrating, but it's an environmental thing. So the University of Kentucky did a study back in the 2000s, and they wanted to disprove, whatever, this situation. And what they did was they depotted plants. They took 25% of the pods off, and this was at R5, I believe it was, R5. And so late in seed fill, they pulled these pods off, and they did 25 and 50%. When they pulled 25% of the pods off, the stem stayed green after the rest of the field matured for about a week. When they pulled 50% of the pod potential off, so 50% of that potential, when the leaves were ready to fill it, they pulled those pods off. They stayed green for over 45 days. And they said in most cases it frosted, and then they turned brown, obviously, because it frosted. So it's lost the pod potential there at some point during seed fill, but it had more in the leaves to give. And unfortunately, it just didn't have enough seeds to be able to fill in this case. So still could have really good potential in these beans, but they're just going to be frustrating to combine.
Could be a little varietal, could be a little moisture, but for the most part, it's really just out of our control based on the moisture and the year that we had, and the fertility and all the things. GEM triangle is huge in this factor, playing into that. But pods are filled. We just didn't have any more.
Yeah, beans are so, you know, we always try to do things on corn. It's much easier to get a response, but soybeans are not near as sensitive to our management, whether it's fertility or whatever it is. It's much more environmental. You know, and obviously genetics. So genetics by the environment, if they're a high yielding bean, you know, sometimes all those factors play in, and you end up with some green stems. So yeah, it's frustrating, that's for sure. But in a lot of cases, we still have mature pods. Obviously these are popping. They're probably well under 13%. Just frustrating to run the combine through these kind of beans.
Slow process. So thank you, Phil, for your insight. We really appreciate it. Hopefully that gives you a little explanation as to why you're going 2 miles an hour through the field for your beans, but it's over. Hopefully it's over soon for you, and beans go quick. But thanks, Phil, for your insight. We really appreciate you watching, and if you have more questions, reach out to your Liqui-Grow field advisor.
Stay in the know with Liqui-Grow.